Imagine you're standing alone in a forest 50,000 years ago. You're hungry. You're thirsty. The sun is beginning to disappear behind the trees. There are no supermarkets nearby, no convenience store, no phone, no GPS. And if you want to survive the night, there's something you need to know. Something almost every human around you already understands. But you don't. You feel the heavy weight of the silence, the creeping cold of the approaching dusk, and the sudden realization that without the right knowledge, you are completely at the mercy of the elements. Your modern intuition is useless here. The rustle of a leaf isn't just wind, it's a message you cannot translate. The growing darkness isn't just the end of the day, it's the start of a predatory shift. To those who belong here, the wild is an open book. To you, it is a dangerous mystery in a language you never learned to speak. Every shadow seems larger, and every snap of a twig sounds like a warning, as the unforgiving world of your ancestors closes in on you. You are an outsider in a landscape where every detail matters for your very existence. You need to know how to read the land. You need to know where water is hiding, which plants are safe, which tracks belong to animals, where predators might be sleeping, and most importantly, you need to know how to turn the landscape around you into a source of survival. For thousands of generations, this knowledge was essential. Children learned it from their parents. Parents learned it from their parents. It wasn't written in books. It wasn't taught in schools. It was simply part of being human. It was an oral and visual inheritance, a continuous chain of wisdom passed down through the millennia. This was the collective memory of our species, sharpened by necessity and refined by trial and error over 50,000 years. Every berry tasted and every track followed was a data point in a vast biological database stored only in the minds of the living. But today, most of us have lost it. We have severed the thread that connected us to our primary survival mechanism, leaving us functionally blind in the very world that once gave us everything we needed to flourish. This lost language is what once separated the living from the dead, and the masters of the wild from the victims of it. So what was the survival skill every human once knew? It wasn't just hunting. It wasn't just making fire. It wasn't even building shelter. It was something much broader: the ability to read nature. And without modern technology, this skill could mean the difference between life and death. Think about how you find food today. You probably don't need to know where wild berries grow. You don't need to recognize animal tracks. You don't need to know which roots contain water. You simply walk into a store and choose something from a shelf. Modern civilization has separated us from the environment that once controlled every part of our lives. But ancient humans couldn't afford that separation. The landscape was their supermarket, their pharmacy, their weather forecast, their roadmap, and their warning system. Everything had to be observed with absolute precision. To lose focus for a moment was to risk death. To misinterpret a single sign was to lose a vital meal or potentially become one for something else. This constant state of heightened awareness wasn't stress. It was a deep, active engagement with existence itself. Our ancestors were never tourists in nature. They were an integral part of its balance. Imagine walking across a grassland with an experienced hunter. Suddenly, they stop. You don't see anything. They crouch down and touch the dirt. Then, they point. A faint impression in the soil, a footprint. To you, it looks like nothing more than a bit of disturbed earth. To them, it tells a complex story. The animal passed recently. It was moving toward the river. The tracks are deep, meaning it was heavy and perhaps tired. The direction and gait tell them where it went and what it was doing. And suddenly, an invisible animal becomes visible in their mind. This was the ancient survival skill, not simply seeing, understanding what you were seeing. And humans became remarkably good at it. Ancient hunters learned to recognize broken branches, disturbed vegetation, droppings, feathers, sounds, and even changes in animal behavior. A silent forest could tell a complete story if you knew how to listen. They could read the speed of a gazelle, the mood of a lion, and the age of a trail just by the subtle displacement of dust and the state of a bent blade of grass. They possessed an eye for detail that would make a modern detective seem blind by comparison. But tracking animals was only one part of the skill. Water was even more important. You can survive without food for a surprisingly long time, but without water, things become dangerous much faster. Ancient humans, therefore, needed to know where water could be found at all times. Sometimes the answer was obvious: a river, a lake, a spring. But during dry seasons, water could be hidden or underground. People learned to recognize specific vegetation that only grew near subterranean reservoirs. They followed animal trails because animals also needed to drink. They watched birds flying toward water sources at specific times of the dawn or dusk. They knew exactly where rain collected after storms in the secret hollows of rocks. They understood the landscape through decades of experience and the cycles of the wild. They knew that a certain shade of green on a distant hillside meant life was buried just beneath the surface. They could smell moisture on a breeze that a modern human would perceive as dry heat. This literacy of water was the difference between thriving and perishing in the arid reaches of the ancient world. To them, every bird and every leaf was a compass pointing toward the source of life. And then there were plants. This was one of the most dangerous forms of knowledge to acquire and pass on. The difference between an edible plant and a poisonous one could sometimes be almost impossible for the untrained eye to see. Ancient communities, therefore, built enormous libraries of botanical knowledge without ever writing a single book. They knew which roots could be eaten, which leaves needed specific preparation, which berries were safe and which were lethal, which plants could reduce pain, which ones could cause sudden sickness, which trees contained useful fibers for ropes, which plants could be turned into life-saving medicines. Imagine knowing hundreds of different plants simply by looking at them from a distance, not because you studied them for fun, but because your life depended on every single identification. They understood the seasonal cycles, knowing exactly when a fruit would ripen or when a root would be most nutritious. They knew how to process toxins to make food edible and how to use the sap of a specific tree to bind a wound. This wasn't just a collection of facts. It was a vital, intimate relationship with the floral kingdom that sustained every aspect of their health and longevity. This knowledge was usually learned slowly through immersion. Children watched adults. They followed experienced gatherers. They learned which plants appeared during different seasons and where to find them. Eventually, they became teachers themselves, ensuring the chain remained unbroken. Nature wasn't just a source of food. It was also an active warning system. Ancient humans had to understand weather and environmental shifts. A sudden change in wind direction could mean a major storm was approaching. Dark clouds on the horizon signaled heavy rain long before the first drop fell. Certain animal behaviors could indicate hidden danger, the way birds become suddenly silent before a predator strikes, the specific alarm call of a monkey signaling a leopard on the prowl. To the ancient eye, the environment was constantly communicating and providing a live feed of information that updated with every second. Ignoring the news of the forest or the plains meant missing the critical shift from safety to peril. Their ears were tuned to frequencies of survival that we have long since tuned out in our noise-filled modern world, where the hum of machines has replaced the voice of the wilderness. Modern technology has granted us incredible convenience, but it has cost us this profound level of observation. Today, most of us could walk past a water-rich root, a medicinal flower, or the tracks of a dangerous predator without noticing a thing. We are disconnected from the heritage of our ancestors, living in a bubble of safety that our forefathers could never have imagined. Yet that capacity for deep reading still lives within our biology. Our brains were shaped by millions of years of identifying patterns in the chaos of nature. This ancient skill was what made us the most successful species on Earth. It was the original science, the systematic observation of the natural world to derive fundamental truth. As we navigate our high-tech lives, it's worth remembering that once the stars, the soil, and the silence were our primary interfaces with reality. We weren't just surviving in nature. We were an integral part of its complex, beautiful, and sometimes terrifying story. The next time you find yourself in the woods, look closer. The land is still speaking to you. We have just forgotten how to listen to its ancient song. Perhaps it is time we started learning the language of our home once again.